What's going on, everybody? We are back. It's a brand new episode of LiamPicksFights, brought to you by PrizePicks. It's the simplest game in all of DFS. If you've never played before, all you have to do is go to prizepicks.com. You can use my promo code Liam. They will deposit match you 100% up to $100. You pick 2 to 5 props that you like. Could be any sport, could be MMA related. They've got stuff on the PFL going on right now as we speak. They've got stuff for the UFC card upcoming. So if you guys want to try them out, you can. If you don't like MMA, you want to look for props on other sports, no problem. They've got everything from esports to NBA, MLB, all the big sports that you know, football as well. So go ahead and check them out, prizepicks.com. All the information you need is in that description box below. And without further ado, I want to introduce my wonderful guest for today's card. We're going to be breaking down UFC Vegas 53. It's going to be headlined by an excellent fight in the bantamweight division. And we've got Rob Font, right, bouncing back very quickly after a defeat to Jose Aldo, a fight that I predicted earlier this year. I had that, written in stone. Jose Aldo on the underdog prediction. Thought he would get it done inside the distance. We saw incredible heart and perseverance from Rob Font. I think we saw Jose Aldo take that foot off the gas just a little bit to prove he could still go 5 rounds. So shout out to everybody that's still here rocking with us. Shout out to my man Tristan, who's already in the chat lighting it up. And shout out to my man Luke from Sparring with Reality Betting, because we have got him back on the program once again, back by popular demand. Friend of the show, Luke. How are you doing tonight, my brother? I know you're not feeling 100%, so we appreciate you soldiering through to still be a part of the show.
Yeah, like you said, a little under the weather, but definitely powering through here. Looking forward to chopping these fights up with you, bro.
Absolutely. Looking fresh to death in that awesome Extreme Couture hat. I'm jealous. I got my New York Rangers hat on. Still got to support them New York boys. I tried to tell you guys about Patchy Mix. If you sleep on them New York boys, they're going to teach you how to wrestle. Happened once again. So shout out Patchy Mix, cashing us a big ticket. Shout out Jessica Andrade, cashing us that big submission ticket as well. So couple bad reads last week. Apologize for those folks. Couple good ones as well. And they cashed out big for us. Saved the evening on the UFC and came through huge in Bellator. Shout out to my man Blake Perry. Guys, I got the Baldwin Wallace sweatshirt on. If you didn't watch it, best fight of the weekend by far. Makoa Cooper, Blake Perry. Makoa Cooper came out hot. Blake Perry had the fire to go all night. And this man comes through in a big way, plus 700 underdog. I know you guys cash those tickets. Go buy a Blake Perry t-shirt with your winnings. Go follow him, Blake MMA 170 on Instagram. Show love to my man. Go watch the interview back. Hell of a story, hell of a competitor. I tried to warn you guys, when most people look for a way out, this man Blake Perry finds a way in. So shout out to my man Blake Perry, friend of the show, first ever fighter interview, and we cashed the plus 700. So don't sleep on these guys that come on my show. All right. Now, that being said, shout out to the Baldwin Wallace Wrestling guys as well. All you guys that watch the show, appreciate you guys big time. Now, we could start off in the 125-pound division. We've got a very interesting fight here with a significant favorite, Tatsuro Taira. He's taking on Carlos Candelario, and people are familiar with Carlos Candelario. This is a guy who's twice fought in the Contender Series, and I think it was evident in those Contender Series bouts. The guy's not very good at wrestling, right? He gives up a lot of takedowns, but he shows heart. He shows perseverance. He'll work his way back up to his feet. He's not just a guy who's going to give up on the first exchange either. But what I think is interesting about Tatsuro Taira is that this guy, he seems to have good counter striking. It's not, a very pressure-based game. He's not really walking guys down, throwing a ton of volume, but he kind of moves back, sets angles, waits for his timing, and then drills guys with the right hand. He's got good timing catching these guys coming in, as far as I'm concerned. And on top of that, when he gets going in the grappling, he's very dangerous. He can cycle through positions. He can hold people down from the back. I was impressed by the fact that even when people would move through positions, he could transition very well in the grappling. A lot of guys, you see them get high on the back, and that's the end of it, right? They fall over the top. They might even get finished themselves. As soon as the position is no longer going their way, they panic. This guy was not like that. He was composed in the grappling. He was moving from position to position. You have to question a little bit the level of competition. He has not fought outside of Japan. That would be one question I would have, is how does he, do performing for the first time in the United States? However, I think his preparation was on point. From everything I understand, he's been out here for many weeks training in Vegas in preparation of the fight. I think that's a huge feather in his cap. I think that shows a good level of preparation. Also, you see this guy Candelario, he's got to fight in the Contender Series. He's got to earn his spot in the UFC. The UFC is like putting out the red carpet for this kid. Like, hey, come on down. Welcome aboard. Like, I think that they view these guys in different lights. I think that Tatsuro Taira, as far as I'm concerned, is the more dangerous, the more lethal grappler in the matchup. I think he's going to be able to impose that skill set at some point here. I think the club and sub is viable. I think a grappling control-based decision is viable. We're seeing a lot of these guys use a backpack mindset, a backpack skill set to hold guys down, win rounds, win positions. And I wouldn't be altogether stunned to see Taira in his UFC debut resort to that body lock position, body triangle, hold on to him, just try and grind out rounds and minutes. And I think, frankly, he's got an opponent that's going to be doable against. He's got a really long frame for the division. I like a lot of things about him. Don't love the price. I don't love the price. I don't really feel passionate about laying the minus 200, price tag, but I may end up getting there by weigh-in time. I want to see what this kid looks like, especially relative to his opposition. I think he's going to be much bigger. But I'm curious to see, both these guys I think are listed at height parity, but I think that, we might see this guy Taira being a little bit bigger than advertised. How do you feel about this one, Luke?
Yeah, so I guess a tad bit of a different take for me. I do think that Candelario is a live dog on this card, just under the pretense for a couple of things that you mentioned. The kid's still only 23 years old. He hasn't fought really much of a strong strength of competition. I would easily favor Carlos Candelario pretty heavily over any of the other guys that Taira's beaten to date. So I think that needs to be said. But I do think for a lot of the reasons you mentioned as well, I do think the guy does pass the eye test in the sense that I think he moves pretty well. Obviously, pretty strong back take, quick in the transitions, decent wrestling as well. We have seen Candelario get his back taken on multiple occasions. But what I will say, the guy hasn't been finished or let alone submitted as a pro. He is a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. He seems to be, a decent boxer as well at the same time. And my big thing is I just don't know how this Taira guy is going to react to any sort of adversity, whether that's boxing based, whether that's wrestling based, whether that's grappling based. I just haven't seen him face any adversity. So, what could go wrong for the 23-year-old who hasn't faced any adversity as a Japanese grappler over minus 200? We've seen some pretty wonky stuff and some pretty overvalued guys coming in making their UFC debuts. An example I always kind of use is the Max Roshkoff over Austin Hubbard fight. Guy going out there on the regionals, kind of just rolling everybody. And, the guy, his takedowns start getting stuffed a little bit. He starts getting punched in the face, cardio dumps, quits on the stool at the end of the second. Not saying that that's going to be the case with Taira or anything like that, but it's just an example of how we do see some of these guys and girls come in that are a bit overvalued when they have not fought a strong strength competition. We don't know how they deal with adversity. So I think Candelario can give him an honest scrap. Probably the biggest thing I'm concerned about is Taira locking in a body triangle like that, and that potentially could be around at the end of the day. But still haven't seen the guy on his back, even if he's able to break any sort of body triangle or even any of those back positions. He could definitely be the guy who can spin in his guard, and we're going to see a Taira on his back potentially for the first time. And I just think Candelario's general pressure might be able to give him some issues. So I do think the line is a bit wide. I haven't made any official stance on it yet because I do think the Taira money is probably going to continue to climb. It's a reasonably light slate. There isn't a ton of big favorites. So I think you're just going to see some general casual parlay money come in his way, which is going to bump that line to boot. So I think I might be able to snag Candelario at plus 220. Once again, confidence interval, not large by any means. But he's the best fighter that the guys fought today, I think can give him an honest scrap at over 2-1. So I'm probably going to be taking a small poke.
I think that makes a lot of sense for the reasons that you stated. And I'm normally not looking to back these guys coming off, like a regional scene. But I did actually see one fight that gave me some confidence, right? Which is I thought that in the Shinzu fight, I don't want to mispronounce the gentleman's name, Shimizu, potentially. He did end up losing that first round, I thought, and he bounced back with a 10-8 round. In my opinion, in the second round, I thought that he looked a lot better when he was able to get that takedown game going, but it was actually from landing a couple hard strikes. He was getting his takedown stuffed a little bit early, and that guy had fast feet. And he had a good leaping left hook. So he kind of like jarred him a couple times with that left hook. But again, he took the punches well in that instance. And the guy kind of looked like a Lineker, type of archetype. He's a very stout guy that he was fighting there. So I felt like he had a little bit of a hard time dealing with somebody with that kind of horsepower. Whereas I think that, against somebody who's a little bit lankier in their own right, like Candelario, he might be able to move around him in terms of his body work. Like the guy's just like kind of weird in how he slings his one leg across and then like rotates, like spins around somebody to take the back. It's pretty interesting stuff. And I'm curious to see if it works at this level. I do think that it might, but I also think that if it doesn't, you certainly have a live underdog in your hands the longer this fight goes. So I think that there's a lot to like on the Candelario side. He does have a lot of experience. He's going to have more credible experience coming in here. But I also think that, you know, I do like the upside on Taira. I think he's going to win some UFC bouts after this one as well. So I like Taira here to get the win, but I definitely understand the underdog shout here from Luke. So with that being said, we can move along to the next fight on the card. A little bit of an uninspired offering here. Gina Mazany, Shana Young. Neither one of them has a ton of momentum, even within their division. Now you got Shana Young trying to make a new start, come down from 135 to 125. Do you think the Shanimals got something to offer here, or are you laying the wood with Gina Mazany?
Yeah, I am one of the schmucks actually that did lay the wood with Mazany here, but I did get a bit better of a price. I played her at minus 155, probably wouldn't, touch her at, 180, 185 where she's at right now personally. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty low level fight. So, usually I'm not, one inclined to lay a bunch of juice, in these type of spots. Gina Mazany hasn't exactly had the greatest career in the world. That definitely needs to be noted. But, she has fought a lot of the time up at 135 against bigger, stronger girls, better girls. In my opinion, I just think she has stylistic advantages in pretty much every realm of this fight. I think her output's more consistent. She's more willing to come forward. She's definitely struggled with some more aggressive, powerful girls, but Young just hasn't shown really many of those components. She hasn't shown to be much of a hitter. So I'm less concerned in that regard to Mazany, getting dinged here. And then obviously in Young's 4 pro losses, the ground's been a pretty significant component in all of those as well, where I do think Mazany is a pretty proactive wrestler. She's shown to be pretty strong from top positions when she gets there. I think she attempts over 10 takedowns per 15 minutes. So she's consistent to be active there. I just think Shana Young looks pretty lost on bottom, and a girl in Mazany who's consistent to attempt those takedowns, look decent from top, land ground and pound, has somewhat of a sub game as well. I just don't think it's great for Young. I think she's probably reliant on having to clip Mazany with something, or, maybe reverse her or sweep her or something of that nature. To cover her price tag in this fight. I do think it's actually a good bounce back spot for Mazany, because even against Cachoeira, the last fight at 125 that she got dinged, she was winning 80% of that fight before that happened, and we know that Priscilla Cachoeira hits like an absolute truck. Say what you want about her, but the girl hits hard at 125 at the end of the day, as per her Zombie Girl nickname to boot. So yeah, I don't give a ton of credence to Young in this matchup, but once again, it's a low level fight, so that always brings more variance. It's definitely not something I'm loading up on, despite my reasonably stronger opinion on Mazany in the spot. So I only have a couple of units on it, but I'm happy with the price. I got around 60%.
For sure. And I'm actually just going to outright agree with you here. I did not like anything that I saw from Shana Young, broadly speaking. I thought pre-UFC she had, what looked like, some potential, but I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. She doesn't really have the physicality to deal with women at this level of the game, from what I've seen. And on top of that, Gina Mazany, say what you will, Priscilla Cachoeira is much more physical. She was picking her up, taking her down, doing everything she wanted for a while there. A couple inopportune stand-ups, which stand-ups I think are kind of bullshit most of the time. I don't like Lampe mixed martial arts either. I think more aggressive use of like stalling as like a reprimand is something that they could borrow from wrestling to make the sport more exciting. Just call on people to work, and threaten to penalize points. That will actually get people to work, in my opinion, as opposed to just resetting the position, which is like, hey, do you like this kind of martial arts better? Here you go. Like it just doesn't really make sense for me as a way of penalizing somebody. But with that being said, I think that, man, Gina Mazany should be able to get takedowns here. I don't see why not. I don't see why she couldn't beat her up from the top position. I don't see why she can't pass the guard. Like, I think she just trains with better people. I think she's a better fighter in her own right. She's lost to better girls. So I think that this is, a little bit of that tempted by a banana peel moment as she gets higher and higher up on the favorite status. It's like, if you got the good price like Luke and you could sit back with closing line value, you could be sure that it's a good bet. Whereas if you take Gina Mazany at minus 185 or whatever she is now, you're going to have to really hope it's a good bet, because she is just a little bit flaky. And I described it that way on the Roto Grinders premium show. I was saying, I think Gina Mazany has the same finishing equity as a lot of the like top level finishers on this card. But the difference is we've just seen her like randomly lose fights or like shut down in fights where she's winning. So that's the kind of thing that concerns me when laying wood. But I think that overall, Gina Mazany is just a better, more complete mixed martial artist. She's got more experience at this weight class, and I think she's got more paths to victory. So I like Gina Mazany. I like her to get it done inside the distance. And haven't played anything on the fight, but that's probably going to be the way I'm looking. Also thought that the fight doesn't go the distance at plus 145 was interesting. I know it's a women's fight, but both these ladies have the propensity to get finished, and I kind of like that as a hedge if I do end up with some Mazany coverage, just in case she ends up quitting on me. I have that coverage on the back end. But I think overall Gina should win the fight, and the fight was booked in order to make her look good. With that being said, we can move along to a fight at 155 pounds. We got Mike Breeden on the one hand. He's taking on Natan Levy on the other side. And Mike Breeden's got the more professional experience here, but Natan Levy, he looked a little bit more promising, I would say, in his UFC debut. I actually bet him in that spot against Rafa Garcia. Rafa Garcia, that loss has aged, considerably well. He's looked good in his recent UFC bouts. I think that he's shown that he's a competent wrestler, a competent grappler. Kind of gave Levy some issues there entering in on his takedown attempts. So Levy instead was forced to have this outside kickboxing match with him. Neither one of them is that proficient at it, so kind of became a little more of a stalemate. I think that in this kind of spot, Natan Levy, he's got potentially grappling upside for sure. I think that if he's able to get his wrestling game off, he's going to be able to use his grappling to his advantage to pass the guard potentially and look for submissions. But I also think on the feet, he's going to have his opportunities to counter. He's going to be able to create some angles. I don't think Breeden is the most sophisticated guy. Do think he's, pretty reliable to come forward and be aggressive, but I just don't rate his skill set very highly. Alexander Hernandez, not a guy I think is long for the UFC. And he got cleaned up there accordingly very quickly. Granted, Hernandez does carry big power. He could have put out Moicano in that first round. But I do think that I don't rate Mike Breeden personally. I don't think that he's got a huge future. I did like everything I saw from Levy regionally. So I think Levy would be my play here. I haven't gotten involved on either side here. How do you feel about this, Luke?
Yeah, it's probably an easier pass spot on the card for me. Once again, it's not the highest level fight. I actually was on the other side of Levy's last fight. I did play Garcia at plus money. I just haven't been the biggest fan of Levy in the past. He actually comes from a karate background, but he just doesn't really utilize any sort of range-based tools effectively, in my opinion. He's more of a kicker than a puncher, but guys have been able to kind of come in and hit him pretty consistently. I think it was in his last LFA fight. He was on skates pretty bad. To his credit, the dude showed some pretty solid recoverability, was able to come back and ultimately end up winning that fight. But I guess I would still probably favor Breeden on the feet just because I think he's a better boxer. I think he's a little bit better mechanically. I think he's a little bit more trustworthy to get inside. But ultimately, my pick is Levy because I do think the wrestling is going to be the difference in this fight, despite that karate nature from Levy. He's actually a better wrestler grappler, in my opinion. I think he has a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. He's shown a pretty decent top game. I do think he's the more physical party of the two. I believe Breeden is a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, and we haven't seen him like held down a ton extensively, which is, kind of interesting, which from some perspective does give, or I should say at least at one point did give me some moderate interest in taking a small shot on Breeden. But I do think the wrestling at the end of the day is going to be the difference. And I think we see Levy kind of grind out a relatively competitive decision.
I love it. So overall, you got both of us on the Levy side here without a huge amount of conviction. Neither one of us got to the window with it. But I think Levy's going to win the fight. I do think he's got some finishing potential. I'm not sure how reliable Breeden is to stick around for the whole 15 minutes if the fight gets hard. But we're going to have to wait and find out. Obviously, big power is one thing. I think the pressure, the wrestling could be another way to make him find that exit door, but we're going to have to wait and see on Saturday. I think it should be a good, fun fight early on in the card. Shout out to my man, Alex. The general says Levy, by decision. Hey, I think very plausible. Definitely a path to victory. I think he's got multiple paths here, and that's ultimately why I'm siding with him this weekend. Now we can move along to a 170-pound fight where we've got the returning Gabe Green taking on the undefeated Yohan Lainesse. And this is an interesting one, man, because I tried to fade this guy once. Lainesse, he took my money. He ran away with it. Big smile on his face. Nice knockout. Beautiful job. I thought that Burlinson had a chance to beat him on the Contender Series. Kind of kept his head on that center line. Paid for it dearly. Got hit real hard, knocked out brutally there. So I think that this guy carries a lot of power. He's obviously knocked people out in a variety of different ways. Might be a finish reliant guy. Does seem like he's going to get tired over the course of 15 minutes. Kind of one of those guys who commits to everything 100%. But I also think that Gabe Green, he's a little hittable to go against somebody like that. I know a lot of people that I respect laying the price on Gabe Green, they move this number, let's say. But I also think that once it's at this price, I'm a lot less interested in playing Gabe Green. If I could have got in at plus 100, to fade him on the potential, yeah, I think so. But now that I have to lay this minus 140, minus 135 number, I'm a lot less interested. I think there's been some sharp buyback on the Lainesse side. I think that he could win this fight by knockout. He is a big, powerful guy. When you have a hittable fighter against a big, powerful guy, even if the one guy's a little bit cleaner, it could be a problem. But ultimately, I think Gabe Green should be able to use lateral movement, get himself away from enough of these big strikes, make his opponent miss. I would ultimately pick him, but I just don't think I'm going to get there with a bet on Gabe Green this weekend. How about you?
Yeah, so I was one of the earlier movers on Green. I played him at 115. Once again, kind of similar to Mazany at, current price. I do think there's still actually a smidge of value on it, but not like a ton. So I don't know if I'd be clamoring to play him at, minus 140. But I thought you broke the fight down pretty well, at least in regards to Lainesse. That's pretty much my general opinion of him. He's a powerful guy, but I don't think he's really technical. It's a lot of hooks, overhands, very explosive, loaded actions as well. I think what he throws can also be pretty telegraphed at the same time. Not going to see a ton of straights from him. I've seen him start, breathing pretty heavy in the second rounds of fights that have been extended for him. All that stuff is just a pretty big red flag for me, especially going into the UFC. Obviously, Gabe Green, isn't a defensive striking savant by any means, but neither is Lainesse, in my opinion. I don't think he's faced a ridiculous amount of resistance in that capacity against the kind of pressure boxer that Gabe Green is. And to Gabe Green's credit, in his last two fights in the UFC, the guy has to come in and face a fringe top 15 guy, and D-Rod eats over 170 significant strikes. Looked fine there. I thought he made a decent account of himself, all things considered, despite getting 30-27. The guy looked fine against, Phil Rowe, who we know also hits pretty hard, was able to compromise him with leg kicks, who's also a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, has shown some dangerous grappling competency at the same time. So once again, my take is not strong, but it's more so in relation to at least just where I played it. I favor Green to win minutes in this fight. I think his cardio is a bit better. Despite getting knocked down in 2 of his 3 pro losses, I actually think his hardware might be a bit better. Once again, I have concern with him getting knocked out, but I'm not overly convinced that Lainesse, comes out and wrestles him or, goes out there and really puts a pace on a guy like Gabe Green. I could be wrong, but at minus 115, I think that's short as I'm back in the more superior minute winner in the fight.
That makes perfect sense to me. I think that, definitely the early finishing equity resides mostly on the Lainesse side. But I do think that over the course of this fight, Gabe Green will find opportunities to work his way into it. So as long as he doesn't get nuked early, I think he will look hindsight like the side. And so we're wishing Gabe Green the best of luck here in his comeback fight, and best of luck on Luke's bet as well. I don't have any action on the fight. Probably not going to look to get involved there too heavily one way or the other, but should be a hell of a banger. 170 pounds too. Good fight, good fighters, should be fun. I'm excited. That being said, we can move along to the 125-pound division. And, you won't be hearing me say good fighters here. These are fighters that are a little bit more on the unproven side. But with that being said, I do think that we have one of these, y'all must have forgot a little bit on Francis Figueiredo. He's not the best fighter. He's obviously not. He's probably in the UFC because of his brother. But he's not a bad fighter. He's not a horrible fighter. And sometimes I think that take gets bandied about a bit too much. Malcolm Gordon, if you engage him in a grappling-based fight, has a chance to beat you, at 125 pounds. He's pretty fast. He's pretty mobile. He just doesn't have a great chin. So like Malcolm Gordon, he's shown he can be dangerous even at the UFC level with some submission attempts. But it's just a question of, where is this fight going to go if it goes 15 minutes, right? Because you have two guys with unproven cardio. But I think you have one guy who's shown he could fight for 15 minutes and give it his all and push through. And then you have another guy who we just don't know that that's the case. It's not proven that it's not the case necessarily, but I think that there's reason to believe that because of his big action style, because of the things that he does, throwing a lot of spinning attacks, doing a lot of big kicks, I think that he leaves himself open to not only be taken down and controlled potentially, but also to gas himself out, to use too much energy too fast and burn through it. So I think it's interesting to see the plus money numbers on the Figueiredo side. I've made money betting on Malcolm Gordon. I think that people underrate him a bit. So I think that, potentially that rub is going the opposite way here on Figueiredo. And I don't think he's that bad. I don't think he's good, but I don't think he's that bad. I don't know exactly what I'm investing in on the other side. I did bet him in his last fight against Molina, and I thought he kind of did exactly what I just described. Kind of came out like a bat out of hell, burnt himself out very quickly, and that was the wrap there. And obviously Jeff Molina has shown he could go 15 hard minutes in the UFC, but I don't know. That just wasn't an inspiring performance for me. I think it leaves some holes that we could see Figueiredo exploit here. So I like Figueiredo. How do you feel, Luke?
Yeah, I don't really have much to say just because Lacerda de Silva, whatever the guy's name is, apparently it's the same. He's got both on his birth certificate or something. I don't know what's going on with his name, but I think we got less than 15 minutes of footage on the guy. So, I mean, it's just really hard to cap that archetype of a fighter, especially coming from the Brazilian regional scene as well. I thought you broke the fight down pretty well. I'm more so on the side of Lacerda just because I don't really like the pacing of Figueiredo personally. It seems to be a bit on the lower end. It is, a lower weight class division. But obviously I have, gigantic questions of what Lacerda looks like in an extended fight to boot. I guess I'm a bit more lower on Malcolm Gordon personally than you are. I don't think it was a very good look dropping minutes, at least on the floor later in that fight to Gordon. I thought it was a pretty winnable fight for him actually on paper. But he did a lot of things to essentially lose that fight for himself, in my opinion, more than Malcolm Gordon winning that fight. So I just didn't like that. Even in his, I think one of his first regional scene fights that we have available, was a relatively competitive fight. Once again, pacing wasn't great. So, yeah, I have no clue. I want no part of this fight. I'm gonna actually pick Silva to win a decision just to have some contrarian fun with it and see how that goes. But yeah, I don't really have much to say with the matchup.
No problem there. And sometimes what I look for is these opportunities. And now I'm going the opposite way on the Taira matchup, right? Where Taira's like 23 and his opponent's like 30. But sometimes I look for these matchups where you think there's like a perceived age advantage, like one guy's 25 and the other guy's 32 or something. Because one guy might just be like still having fun, still partying, still doing whatever he's doing, like, living the dream. Whereas one guy's just a hardened professional. And I kind of think that might be what we see here. Figueiredo's training with his brother, the world champion. He's got a good situation around him. And I'm sure that, he has more say in the matchmaking meetings than somebody like De Silva. And I do think that this is, a winnable fight for the Figueiredo side here. So I'm going to be looking dog or pass, but best of luck to anybody betting on this fight. And shout out once again to the chat. We got Glenbot says no distance for me. cheers, best of luck. I think that that's definitely viable, but I just don't love backing it at this weight class personally, because I've been burnt many times thinking that flyweights were, a surefire thing to finish. And then also we got Silva by sub in round 3. Okay, so you think his cardio is going to check out? More power to you, Alex. So that being said, we can move along to the next fight on the card here. We have got, oh my goodness, I got to go 2 fights back. There we go. We've got Alexander Romanov and Chase Sherman. Listen, there's not much that really needs to be said on this fight as far as I'm concerned. I'm not going to be betting this fight. I don't think most people could bet this fight. Odds makers, public, we all agree basically what's going to happen here. It's going to be a takedown. It's going to be a slammo. It's going to be something big, and it's going to be Romanov probably on top of this guy beating the shit out of him in all likelihood. So you could take your Chase Sherman, freaking like underdog plays. God bless you, right? I took Mike Jackson untracked last week because I was like, this guy Dean Barry is not minus 1,100 against anybody. And as the great Ozzy P said, if you parlay Dean Barry, you may potentially, just potentially, be a bot. That's just a question mark. But all I'm saying is this. When I look at Chase Sherman's game, man, I know Jay Collier's not bad, right? He's not bad on the ground. And people sometimes like talk like he is. Like his first martial art was jiu-jitsu at age 19. He's not bad on the ground. But he shouldn't run through your guard like it's not there if you've had a pro fighting career this long. So it's just like there was 10 red flags in that fight alone. Chase Sherman, when he's on the sauce, looks like one guy. When he's off the sauce, looks like another guy. Same with Ben Rothwell. A couple of these guys, all allegedly. Nobody sue me. But yeah, I just think it's a way different story with Chase Sherman here. I don't think he's really about it. I don't think he wants this fight even. I think he just wants some money. And so more power to him. I hope he gets some money. And I hope it's a short fight so we can move on. How about you, Luke?
Yeah, once again, not much to say. It's one of those fights, kind of got to see the forest through the trees, at least from like a narrative booking standpoint. I mean, the guy's 3-8 in the UFC. I'm not sure if there's anybody with a worse record than that with over 10 fights in the UFC. Not trying to dog the guy. It just is what it is. They're signing him to his now 3rd stint to be brought in to lose. That's how he's going to be booked going forward. That's what's happening here. He still hasn't had a full camp for the fight at the end of the day too. So but one thing I will definitively say, I'm not parlaying Alexander Romanov at minus 2,500. You're getting, no value out of that. It still is a heavyweight fight. At the end of the day, it is still a fight at the end of the day. I'm not trying to make the case for Chase Sherman or there's value on him or anything. It's just one of those fights you got to stay away from. I mean, even the under 1.5 is like sitting, minus 300 or something inside the distance is crazy. Even as round 1 prop is like over minus 200. It's like, you're not extracting really any value anywhere on this fight.
I think the only case to be made is that he is a value play on DraftKings, because you've got a guy who's like minus 250 to finish the fight in the first round. And he's probably going to get a takedown and land some significant strikes and probably get a first round or second round finish. So I think that there is some upside in terms of Romanov on DraftKings, but otherwise.
Hey, bro, that's what I said last week, and he killed all of our.
Hey, dude, I did the same thing, but I'm going back swinging again. You don't get freebies like this, in my opinion, very often. And, just like looking at the matchup, there's nothing to like on paper about Chase Sherman except that he throws leg kicks. And if he throws a leg kick at a guy who's just waiting to take him down, what's to stop the guy who's also got this barrel chest from just running into him and knocking him over? Like, we've seen that that's enough to take down Chase Sherman. You don't need a takedown attempt. You can just barrel into him. I don't think he's got a good chance here. So with that being
we'll
said,
say though, real quick though, Liam,
along.
is that Romanov looks in pretty sick shape. It looks like he's dropped it.
Man.
He's dropped a ton of weight.
How could you doubt this guy now? When he was big and fat and just throwing body kicks, he was doing fine. So now I think showing up in shape, big adjustment, lifestyle change. The UFC is probably like, all right, now we can try and move this guy up the division. And this is just another finish in his cap in all likelihood to push him along. With that being said, we can move along. We got a match at 185. 185 is one of my favorite weight classes to cap. I know a lot of people don't like that. Like as a weight class, I like light heavyweight. I like middleweight. I like getting into these guys that are a little bit bigger, a little slower, a little bit more predictable sometimes. And I think Gerald Meerschaert, historically speaking, just a guy that doesn't get the love he deserves, right? Like you look at Gerald Meerschaert, I know that he's a little stiff. I know that he's not very fast. I know he's not the world's greatest athlete. I know he doesn't move his head enough. All those are true, fair criticisms. but the guy is so much fun. How do you not love Gerald Meerschaert? Like anytime the guy's fighting, he's live to win the fight. My man Lucrative described it as, the Nikita Krylov and Paul Craig of the middleweight division. I love that analogy, right? Because Nikita Krylov, better fighter on paper, right? And nobody would look at their skills and be like, hey, these guys are two equal standing guys. But one of them's way more dangerous. And I thought that was evident there. Paul Craig, just a more dangerous guy in what he does. Even Krylov in every advantageous position he could want wasn't able to get Paul Craig out of there. Paul Craig, from a position of disadvantage, locks up one submission, the fight's over. That's kind of what I see here as well, right? I see Krzysztof Jotko as a guy who's clearly the better fighter, like just in terms of who would naturally be selected as a fighter more often. It's like, obviously Jotko, he's long, he's got pretty good speed, he's got pretty good lateral footwork, he's a bouncy guy, he's proven he can win close decisions. Like, there's a lot of things to like on the Krzysztof Jotko side, except the fact that he's not very dangerous. He's fighting in a dangerous division, middleweight. Some of these guys finish and get finished, and even when he hurts people, he just has a poor killer instinct, in my opinion. We saw it against Uriah Hall. He has this guy hurt. He has this guy ready to quit, go home, break, and Uriah Hall finds his way back into the fight. It's like, Jotko, come on. We can't let Uriah Hall back in, man. It's just, there's these things that make me question Jotko. I do think he's shown improvement over time, but this is a guy who's lost via guillotine choke in the UFC. And you're telling me Gerald Meerschaert's like plus 480 to submit him, the most prolific submission threat in the middleweight division's history? Fuck off. I'm going to be betting Gerald Meerschaert by sub. I think Jotko wins the decision if it gets there. I just think Gerald Meerschaert's a more dangerous guy. Money line doesn't really impress me here either direction. I think they're kind of shading it towards that Gerald Meerschaert finishing equity. I think on a decision-only market, Jotko's a pretty significant favorite here. But I also think the club and sub is viable. Just because this guy Gerald Meerschaert doesn't hit many people hard, people forget he hit Makhmudmuradov with a bunch of big body kicks before that guy got tired. People forget that Gerald Meerschaert has scored a TKO in the UFC. I know we don't rate Eric Spicely. Still did it. Still has hurt other guys and finished them with the guillotine shortly thereafter. He's not really a guy who's always looking for the takedown. He'll fight you, get you into a weird compromised position, and then take advantage instantly and make you pay. And I think that that's the kind of thing he could do here. Dustin Stolfus, he doesn't get any credit or respect either. He showed off in that fight. He's not a bad grappler. He's just been given these two really exceptionally tough grappling tests, and he did great against Meerschaert until he got a little tired, and then everything fell apart. Gerald Meerschaert is patience plus submissions equals jiu-jitsu. I think that he's very, very good at that, and I think that we could see it once again this weekend. How about you, Luke?
Yeah, I mean, I can't hate on anyone taking a sub shot on, Meerschaert at over plus 400 or whatever the number is, just because, I think the guy's, number one, obviously active in the middleweight division in terms of submissions. I think he's number 3 overall in the UFC in terms of active submissions. So the guy's incredibly dangerous, but I'm actually kind of on another side of more of just an anti-violence route. I'm actually on the over 2.5 at evens. I do think Jotko just has a game to stay upright and potentially nullify the dangerous game of Meerschaert, at least more often than not. Once again, the take isn't supremely confident. It's not a massive chalky price. I don't, minus 200 or anything like that. But, he does stuff takedowns at certain points as well in the fight. I think he took him down 5 times, was able to get to back right on him, but he did a good job in terms of nullifying hooks or avoiding any dominant positions. We know Misha Serkinov's a pretty good grappler who's also a pretty physically strong guy at the same time to boot. You did mention, he did get guillotined back in the day, but we're talking like 9 years ago or so. So I don't know how much there is to really take away from that personally. I just think Gerald's going to really struggle to get him down. I actually see if Gerald is able to have the grappling success in this fight, I think it probably comes more into transitions off of early failed takedown attempts, or if Jotko somehow ends up in top position. I actually see that's where GM3 probably works his game. So once again, not a super confident take, but I just don't think Jotko can bust a grape. Personally, he's not a guy out here proactively hunting submissions. So I do think the large finish equity does probably come with Gerald, but based on how Gerald fights, I don't think he's screwed to win a decision either. Jotko isn't exactly an output machine. we have seen him get stuck on the cage at points too. If Gerald makes it, a gritty, scrappy fight, I could see him closing the margins on the feet here as well to potentially win minutes and win a decision. So that wouldn't be shocking, but my official pick is kind of, greasy, slower, 29-28 Chris Jocko decision.
Fair enough. And I think that that's kind of what we're looking at here, a stylistic dynamic that favors Jotko in a decision. It favors more often than not Gerald inside the distance. However, guys, Gerald Meerschaert gets knocked down 1.5% of all the strikes that hit him. It's not good. He doesn't have a great chin. He has been knocked out by Ian Heinisch. He was one punched by Khamzat Chimaev. Now, I'm not taking anything away from him. He did take those fights in rapid succession, but we just have to be wary and cognizant of the fact that if you're getting hit with clean, straight punches, you could go out. Gerald Meerschaert has shown he can go out. I just think that over the course of 15 minutes, if he doesn't go out and he's fighting a guy with a very low knockdown rate, Gerald actually knocks down people at a higher rate than Jotko, believe me. So I think that it's an interesting fight, and I think Gerald is a live underdog this weekend. Don't think I'll get there on the money line, but maybe an inside the distance, maybe a submission play on Gerald Meerschaert is how I will target that fight in particular. But I would caution people who are on the, inside the distance only market for GM3. He can't get knocked out here. So you might be, kicking yourself if you didn't take the big plus money figure and you laid a little bit more money on a market that's still as volatile, in my opinion. With that being said, we've got another fight that I don't have a very strong opinion on at all. We've got Darren Elkins taking on Tristan Connolly. And to be honest with you, I think that there's been a little bit of, slander on the name of Tristan Connolly, like people talking like he has no skills in MMA. I think he's a pretty competent grappler. I think he showed that by going the full distance with a guy like Sabatini. I just don't know how well his frame, his age translates to being a prospect in this division. But with that being said, he's taking on Darren Elkins, who I think is completely shot. I cashed a big ticket on Cub Swanson by knockout. Cub Swanson last time out against Darren Elkins. That's a much different quality of competition. It's a much more dangerous striker. But we have just seen a regression, I would say, in the skills of Darren Elkins over time, in the physicality, in the durability as well. And he's taken a ton of damage. He's had a ton of UFC fights. Tristan Connolly is the much fresher fighter in my view. But then the question becomes, what does he really have to offer? Is he going to hurt, Darren Elkins in this fight? I'm not sure. Is he going to be more physical than him and get on top of him over and over? I don't really see that either. Who's going to be favored in the cardio dynamic? I don't really know. I think probably Elkins, but I also don't think Connolly has demonstrated bad cardio. He did win that third round. And if not win it, then certainly it was one of his more competitive rounds against Sabatini. So I have a lot of questions about this fight. I don't have a lot of answers about this fight. I'll be sitting back watching with my Inquisitor General hat on and just trying to get some information about these guys because I really don't feel confident backing either one of them. If I was forced to make a bet on this fight, I would bet on Tristan Connolly on principle because I don't think that Darren Elkins is going to win many more fights in the UFC. I do think that he's looking shot. I think that he's had a bunch of winnable fights with guys that aren't really fully UFC level in some of his recent wins. So those are all my concerns on the Elkins side. And I think that he could still beat guys that have cardio problems for sure. Like he can outlast some guys. But I think that if you fight a smart, measured approach, you could definitely beat somebody like Darren Elkins too. So I'm not so convinced that he's going to just get relentless top time in this fight like a lot of people think.
Yeah, I guess no overtly strong opinion, just based on I think it comes down to, like you touched on, where is Darren Elkins at this point in 2022? I think stylistically, it's actually a pretty good fight for him. And if you were telling me, the fight was booked 4 or so years ago, and there's the same line, I'd have probably a max bet on Darren Elkins, to be completely honest, but that's just not the case. And, when these guys get in their late 30s, early 40s, and, the damage is taking damage, no pun intended. It might not take much because I don't think Conley's really much of a hitter. I classify him as more of just a general jujitsu guy. He's a decent grappler, black belt, but I don't think his overall skill set really presents a ton. I think he's a pretty meat and potato striker. I don't think he's a great wrestler. do think his cardio is decent, but I'm still not really sold that he's a UFC caliber fighter either. But I also can't unsee, Darren Elkins getting dropped twice by Ryan Hall, who's also a jiu-jitsu guy who's not necessarily known for his striking either, too. But given that we just saw the guy go out there and, drop 2/3 of the fight to Pat Sabatini, who's a pretty strong wrestler. Elkins is a pretty strong one too, in my opinion. Don't see why he can't duplicate the same performance here, have wrestling success. I don't think Connolly's overtly dangerous on bottom enough to submit Elkins. I don't think Elkins has been submitted in over a decade. The last guy to do it was Bronx Oliveira, who we know is the best submission artist in the history of the UFC. So,
in his
honestly,
UFC
I don't
debut,
hate,
nonetheless, crazy. I believe for Charles.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't hate anyone who kind of took an earlier position on Elkins. I wouldn't play him, at 170, 180, 190 where he's at now. So I think, yeah, it was kind of a favorite or pass spot. I don't think Conley's any good personally.
I understand that take. I don't think he's exceptional. I don't think he thrives anywhere really, but I do think that when you give somebody who's just like a generalist, a shot fighter, they might surprise you with a knockout. They might surprise you with a submission. I don't think that Darren Elkins is going to win many more UFC fights, but this is one of the winnable fights that he'll be offered. So good luck to him. God bless him. Hope that he's well. That being said, we can move on to another fight here in the lightweight division. So 10 pounds up, we've got Jared Gordon, the Flash, taking on Grant Dawson. Some would say the fraud. No, I'm kidding. I think that Grant Dawson is a sound fighter, right? And we've seen that he's got some good skills. You put him in with a lower level guy, you could take him out. He could win a fight in comeback fashion, face some adversity against Leo Santos. Had some bets on Leo Santos there and bailed myself out with that sprinkle on Grant Dawson round 3. Cashed it with like 2 seconds left, the plus 1,200. So, shout out to Grant Dawson for it. Thanks for staying with it and finishing right there at the end. Kind of a crazy knockout, too. Sent his mouthpiece flying into the air. It's a really fun one if you haven't seen it. Also a little harrowing. Shout out to my man, Leo Santos. That being said, right, we got Jared Gordon on the other side here. And Jared Gordon's a good grappler, man. I think people sleep on him sometimes in terms of the grappling he's able to do. He trains with really good guys. Danaher guy, very sound jiu-jitsu, heavy on top, able to create good scrambles and good position situations for himself. You see the fight where everybody talks about this guy can't take a punch. The CDF fight is the one they always bring up. He got finished so quick. And I'm like, did you guys actually watch that fight? Because CDF kicks him like 3 times in the balls and then gets on top of him and finishes him. It's like a very weird fight, in my opinion, kind of a little bit of an outlier situation. And then he gets knocked out by Charles Oliveira. It's like, yeah, so did Michael Chandler, who can take hellacious beatings from other guys. So it's like, I think sometimes people put too much stock into this guy has a bad chin. I don't think Jared has an outright bad chin. I don't think it's exceptional either. He has been finished early in fights, late in fights as well. But I think overall he's got a fine chin. It's nothing exceptional, nothing to write home about. I don't think Grant Dawson has exceptional power. I think he's got fine power. I think he's a big lightweight. Going to be a little bit bigger than Jared, I would think. So early in this fight, I'm expecting Grant Dawson to get on top of him, in all likelihood to land some good ground and pound. Maybe even pass to that half guard position. But I bet Rick Glenn last time out against Grant Dawson at the plus 400 tag. I like that spot a lot. I was pissed. I thought it was the best bet of the year and didn't get, the result we were looking for there. But just in terms of odds relative to expectation, did Rick Glenn have a 20% chance of winning that fight? He almost finished that guy. He really put it on him late. And I thought Rick Glenn kind of was a little too complacent in the grappling at portions of that fight and kind of just let minutes slip away. And when he realized, like, shit, I better turn it up or the fight's going to be over, he turned it up big time on that guy. So I think that was a wake-up call for Grant Dawson. He left where he was at. He goes to American Top Team, trying to get a little bit higher level work in. But, sometimes people overrate how much of an impact a camp can have. One camp at a new location, I don't take a huge amount of stock into that. I'd like to see how he fares over time with this new training situation. American Top Team's having some people, bounce in and out, go to new gyms, this kind of thing. Their results haven't been fully correlating with where they were, in some past iterations of the fight game where American Top Team was like the clear gold standard. Just over the weekend, had another example. My man Patchy Mix comes through and beats one of their prides of the gym, Kyoji Horiguchi. They say that this guy's the best bantamweight in the world. So again, just another example of these American top team guys that are highly touted, highly respected, just coming just a little bit short. Now, am I taking anything away from ATT? No. Obviously, a phenomenal gym. Obviously, high-level training partners. Tons of great people. Mateus Gamrat. How many times have I yelled his name? You guys know that I love these guys. But I'm just saying, a little bit of, cool the water on the ATT is the best gym, and we just got to hype all these guys that come out of there. And then on the other side here, Jared Gordon, I just think he's kind of systemically underrated. Like you look at most of the times he's been fighting in the UFC, he fights close. He makes it a competitive fight. He makes it a dog fight unless he gets finished. And so I do think, you have some questions about how the stats have been impacted by the fact that he's been finished quickly. He hasn't had a chance to have some of these better levels of competition fight out over a longer sample size. But I think that in this fight, I could see Jared Gordon coming back late, just like Rick Glenn did. Rick Glenn's huge, though. That's the other difference is he's a really, really big guy. I don't know that we're going to see the same kind of size play an impact in this fight. But I think that he's going to make Grant Dawson work. And if he doesn't get finished in this fight, I think that by round 3, he's going to be competing hard. So I'm probably just going to lay off this. If you got in on the early numbers on Dawson, I get that. I see some people I respect saying I'll play Grant Dawson up to -200. Fair play. That's just not going to be what I do this weekend. I'm going to respect my man Jared Flash Gordon, and I might just sit back and watch this one. I don't know that I'm going to get to a dog shot here either. I do think that it's tough to invest in a dog pre-fight when you think they're going to lose the first round, and I think he's going to lose the first round. So, I think overall I would have to favor, my man Grant Dawson here, but only by a small margin. I think he's going to win the early portions of this fight, and I think he might be in a gritty dogfight once again. And if he can respond better than he did last time, hey, more power to him. But I'm not going to bank on that at chalk yet until I see it. And I think he's kind of had these third-round collapses a little bit in a few of his recent fights. So obviously took steps to address it. Big blessings to him there. If you want to make a change, you want different results, got to do something different. He has done that. Let's see if it pays off for him this weekend. How do you feel about it, Luke?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you as well. I think if you got on the earlier Dawson line, I think that was probably the side here. I don't think there's really any value at the current line. I think the market's kind of corrected probably to right around where it should be personally on my side. I actually did cash a dog bet on Jared Gordon over Joe Selecki in that outing. Definitely a competitive fight.
Likewise.
But despite my take on Dawson being like moderate, I would say this fight, I'm right there with you that Jared Gordon, I don't think is a guy that really gets enough credit. I think his boxing's actually gotten much better over the years. I think he's actually the better striker in the matchup too. He just has a pretty poor tendency to give his back. Despite being pretty defensively responsible in those positions, he can get controlled there extensively. And I do think Dawson is the better wrestler in the matchup with better positional control components at the same time. So I don't really see a submission from Jared Gordon. To your point, I do think there's maybe some, later merit to potentially Gordon making this a greasier fight if, that potential cardio issue hasn't been addressed from Mr. Dawson. But I just think the general minutes being won in this fight are going to be from Dawson. But I do think Gord's actually tough enough to obviously not most likely not get knocked out or put in too many bad spots, at least to the point where he hasn't shown he can get out of at least before. Dawson still isn't a big pure hitter, I would say, at least in terms of his hands standing, which gives me a bit more optimism for Jared in that regard. So actually, at this point, I'd say look to Dawson by points to like plus 155.
Yeah, neither one of these guys actually has a UFC knockdown to the best of my recollection. So, neither one of them's a huge hitter. But I do think that Jared would probably be a little bit cleaner of a striker if this plays out on the feet. I think he's a little bit more comfortable there. And I think that sometimes people forget, I'm just going to briefly run through a couple of the guys that he's been able to get past. Bill Algeo regionally at CFFC. This guy was a regional monster on the CFFC scene. Hakran Diaz, a guy that people forget. He was a talented UFC fighter. Not the world's best fighter. He wasn't lighting the world on fire, but I always, kind of liked his skills. Pretty good low kicker, and Jared Gordon was able to grind him out there. Beats Dan Moret, beats Chris Fishgold, Danny Chavez. Again, not the highest level, but Joe Selecki's been a guy who's been, credited by the market, given a lot of respect on the market. And, he was able to get one over on him as well in his last fight. Granted, it was a close split decision, but I just think that this is a guy who's pretty reliable to fight for your money. And he's on a 3-fight win streak, once again, being priced as an underdog to a guy who's, coming off a draw where he could have easily been finished. So I just think that that's something interesting to note here as we move to the next matchup on the card, where I'll just be honest with you guys. I took a dog shot here on Joanderson Brito. I like this guy. I bet him on his first UFC fight as well. Bill Algeo, just mentioned him. This is a tough guy, Bill Algeo. He's no pushover. The guy's got competent grappling. He's got competent striking. He's got a good high pace rate. And I think that was a lot for Brito to deal with in his first UFC fight. He's used to hitting these guys and they fall down. He's used to taking somebody down and they don't get back up. Bill Algeo offered him both of those threats, and he lost a close, hard-fought decision with a guy who I respected, Bill Algeo. So I walked away thinking more of Bill Algeo and not less of Joanderson Brito based on that fight. I thought it was a scrap. I thought both guys competed, hard there. I just thought Brito, a little bit of cardio, a little bit of gamesmanship, younger guy, just got outthought a little bit by this guy, Bill Algeo, who's a smart fighter in my view. So with all that being said, now I've got Joanderson Brito being offered up at this plus 250 tag. It's like last time, I think he was being slightly favored to beat Bill Algeo. Now he's being a huge underdog to somebody like Andre Fili, who frankly has not proven himself in this price range. He's got 2 losses in the UFC as a minus 300 favorite. That's a huge concern right off the bat. This guy is not returning a huge investment to backers on the money line when he's in the favorite position. He's just been a little less reliable. You want to back Andre Fili? Find a time when he's an underdog and people are thinking low of him and people are sleeping on him, and get involved. He's been a very high-performing underdog in the UFC. But you look at his role as a favorite, no bueno. He just hasn't been reliable chalk, and people have laid it and lost money. So I'm just warning you about that. I think he could win the fight. He obviously has some experience advantages, some potential stylistic advantages. He's got a longer frame here. But we've also seen Andre Fili's been knocked down 3 times in the UFC. Brito carries big power. He throws big winging hooks. Andre Fili's been taken down and controlled in the UFC. He's been controlled for multiple minutes. He's been taken down and put in bad situations, compromised, vulnerable situations. Brito is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. He's got the ability to take the back. He's got the ability to lift people on suplexes. I think he's got a good reactive double leg in space. And I think that against somebody that's not going to offer as much in the BJJ realm as somebody like Bill Algeo, he might be able to get his game off more effectively here. So I like Joanderson Brito as a big moneyline underdog. I do like him for DraftKings purposes. He's the lowest priced fighter on the slate, and I think he has finishing potential. I think he has a chance to win a decision here. So for all those reasons, I like Joanderson Brito. I think he carries good power. I think despite the fact he's got a small frame, he knows how to use it effectively in mixed martial arts. And yeah, I like a lot of things about him, especially that price. I hit it at plus 245 bigly. I hit it at plus 225 for another pop as well. So yeah, I liked him here, and I was part of that early action on the market. Luke, how do you feel?
Take a
Did we
pop
lose
on,
my man Luke for a second?
Oh, you got me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I was about to make a joke. I was going to say that I parlayed Andre Fili just to pimp you a little bit, but no, I actually took a pop on Mr. Brito myself at plus 230. Yeah, I thought you broke the fight down pretty well. My issue with Andre Fili is outside of when he's been able to ding guys, a little bit earlier, he has been a guy who's fought pretty competitive and close when fights have hit the cards at the same time. And I think Brito's a guy who's pretty consistent to come forward, check his heat. I don't think he's, the most technical guy in the world, but to your point, he's got power, he's got aggression, he's got optics that I love, where Fili is a guy who will accept the back foot at points. He's definitely long and big for the division, but he's just not a guy who I think really fights, consistently behind a jab over the course of 15 minutes. He just hasn't really shown that ability consistently over his career. So I don't think Brito's actually going to have a ton of issue getting inside. I do have some concern with his gas tank a little bit with the last fight against Algeo, him potentially getting stuck on bottom a little bit. But to your point, we've seen Fili controlled, as well. We saw him get swept in the first by Youssef. We saw him get controlled a little bit in the second by Youssef as well. We saw him get washed on the mat by Bryce Mitchell. And, Brito's shown to be pretty strong from top position. So I do think there's definitely some veteranship here from from Feely, which is why you probably got to favor him a little bit. The guy's definitely more proven, exponentially more battle tested. But I mean, we're talking a pretty big number next to Andre Feely, closer to that, 70 to 75% indication, as you touched on with his general odds value in the past. That's generally not how he's overtly performing, in that price range very well. So my confidence interval on Brito isn't large by any means, but my take is more so that I just think he can give him an honest scrap. I think he can make it a close fight. He's a guy who's going to go out there and fight for my money at the end of the day. I'll take that in a junkyard dog at plus 230 any day of the week.
And I think the other thing, Luke, I wanted to mention quickly is just the overrating of Andre Feely, broadly speaking, by the market. This is a guy who's priced at pick'em with Bryce Mitchell. That looked like a pick'em fight to you guys? Not to me. I thought that was a pretty clear Bryce Mitchell win. I thought it was pretty clear for him stylistically as well. So I just overall am a little lower than the market on Andre Feely. That was part of my rationale. And you see where bookmakers opened this, it was plus 215. It was the public that bet Andre Feely out to the minus 300 tag. And then I think it was sharp money as limits opened up, pushed that number right back in. So one of the things I would just point out as we move to the next fight is sometimes you see line movement and you have to evaluate, is this sharp or is this not sharp? Because not every line movement is sharp, and a lot of steam chasing goes on in MMA. I think that what happens is sometimes they release a line, somebody hits it early, a bunch of people go, oh, this is going to be the side. They all hit it early, and then real sharp money comes in, hits it one time, and they move the number all the way back down. So I think that that's something to be cognizant of. We saw Kyoji Horiguchi get dropped as like a minus 190. He gets bet all the way out to minus 300. And then what happens? Trickle down as the price gets bet and bet and bet by sharp money as limits go up. So just something to be wary of. Not every line move indicates sharp money, and especially in MMA. That being said, we can move along to the next fight here. We've got Jake, the prototype Collier, taking on Andre the Pitbull Arlovsky. What a co-main event in 2022. We've got Andre Arlovsky, been around forever. He's basically just like a part of the UFC apex. They pull him off the wall every so often and put him in the octagon. And then on the other side, you got Jake Collier, who kind of disappeared for a little while. He actually looked pretty good regionally coming up. He got some wins, beat Gabriel Checo when Gabriel Checo was undefeated and still looked like he was showing up in shape, and looked like he might have been on a little sauce again, allegedly, with all due respect. He looked like he was, physically prepared for that fight, let's say. And he tried to pull guard. He tried to take him down. Couldn't do it. Jake Collier ends up taking his back, submitting him with a rear naked choke. This is the jiu-jitsu guy, right? And I thought that was kind of an impressive win in hindsight. He just outlasted him and submitted Gabriel Checo. I thought that was cool. On top of that, I look at some of these other fights that he had. He's winning fights with spinning back kicks to the body, like whatever. Jake Collier used to look like a pretty competent, aggressive fighter. And then he went up to heavyweight. They called him off the couch. He looks like he hadn't been training too hard, too seriously. And they're like, hey, man, you want this fight with Tom Aspinall? He's like, okay. Not a winnable fight for him, right? He gets the big knee to the body, the big elbow up top. Frankly, Tom Aspinall's finished a number of guys regionally and in the UFC with that same combination. So I don't really hold that against him too much. Then he has a bunch of competitive fights with the likes of Carlos Boy Felipe. He's able to get one over on Chase Sherman in easy fashion. And I think that when I went back and watched his game, it just became apparent to me this guy is probably the better grappler in the matchup. He is like, I think he started training any kind of martial art at 19. It was jiu-jitsu to lose weight, he said. So the guy just picked up martial arts as a 19-year-old, started competing right away in amateur MMA. He's had a bunch of MMA fights, amateur and pro, and he's 33, right? Andre Arlovsky started taking up martial arts at 16. Difference is he's 43. He's 10 years deeper into the game. He's got a bajillion more fights, and the guy has developed a style where he likes to run away, use lateral movement, and then land one or two punches to sway around. And it's been very effective for him. But I think it's going to be very difficult to pull off against a guy like Collier, who I think, broadly speaking, should have the better durability compared to Andre Arlovsky. I think that when I look at the Collier side, I think he's going to throw much more volume. I think he's going to be able to land kicks and punches with better efficacy than Arlovsky will be able to. I think Arlovsky is kind of reliant on his punching game. I think he'll throw some leg kicks, but I don't think that he'll be able to kick the body and the head in the way that Collier may be able to in this spot. And I think that Collier, if he elects to, could get takedowns here. I think he could end up on top of Andre Arlovski. And we've seen Andre, he can sometimes fall apart on the ground. Tom Aspinall hit him with a surprise takedown, and he looked like he hadn't been taken down in years. Like, he looked like he was completely unfamiliar with being on the ground, turns, gives up a no hooks rear naked choke instantly. And I know he almost got TKO'd the round before that. I know. He almost got TKO'd the round before that. Then he gets submitted instantly when he gets taken down. I don't think that his durability is all that it's cracked out to be. I do think that chin can and will be tested again. And I also think on top of that, in the submission round, I don't rate Andre Arlovski. I don't think he's going to submit Jake Collier. I don't think he's going to offer any threats in that realm. So if Jake Collier puts it there, if he takes it there, I don't see why he wouldn't have the advantage. And then when you look at a cage pushing angle, I think Arlovski, he's definitely got some fleet footwork for heavyweight, even at 43 years of age. But Jake Collier is going to outweigh him by probably 20, 25 pounds on fight night. So I don't see a reason why Jake Collier shouldn't be a pick'em at worst in this spot. Andre Arlovski hasn't been favored in a UFC fight in quite some time. He's not normally a UFC favorite. He is normally a UFC underdog. And he's overperformed as a UFC underdog, no doubt about it. But now people are laying wood. They're laying the chalk on Andre Arlovski at 43 years of age. I think it's possible that he could win this fight by decision. But I think he's going to lose this fight. And I think it's probable that he loses it inside the distance. I like Jake Collier. I think he's going to bring it to him. He called for this fight. I know a bunch of guys have called for the Arlovski fight and fallen short. I think that, Andre is going to be in a tougher fight than he's been in a long time. And I think that Collier actually has some natural power. He's not a huge hitter, but he does have some natural power. I've seen him hit and hurt guys on the feet with his overhand rights. I've seen him hit and hurt people with his body kicks. I've seen him hit and drop people with that spinning back kick. So I don't think we're going to see that from heavyweight Collier, but I do think that he is, the more primed fighter. And I like what I'm seeing from his game. I think Jake Collier wins this fight, and I think he's got some sneaky upside to do it inside the distance. Luke, how about you, my man?
Yeah, no real strong opinion here for me at all. I think there's a substantial case to be made for Collier. I think there's a substantial case to be made for Arlovski. I think probably capping it around Pick'em is probably about accurate. With that, I guess you can maybe take a little bit of value out of Collier's money line. I personally just don't think there's enough there. Whereas if you like him inside the distance, I guess that's probably how I would look. There, if that's your opinion. I guess I'm more on the anti-violence route and kind of continuing with the Arlovski trend. I think 13 in his last 15 fights have hit the cards. So even in his latter 40s, he's shown to be a pretty difficult guy to stop, with the only two exceptions of Roz being, who's obviously a massive explosive dude, and then Aspinall, who obviously just caught him off guard and kind of subbed him. I still don't think that's overtly predictive. We also saw Tom Aspinall go out there and do that to Alexander Volkov, and Volkov, even gets submitted by Fabricio Verdum. So I think that just goes to show mainly the level of Aspinall more than anything. So I don't take too much away from Arlovski there. So I'm more so seeing it being just kind of a mid to higher volume level, typical Arlovski. My pick is actually going to be Arlovski by decision, but my confidence interval is pretty low.
Fair enough. And I think that that's what Andre Arlovski is going to be looking to do. He's going to look to skirt the octagon and, land a couple punches at the end. I thought that he lost to Tanner Boser straight up. I thought that Boser kind of gave that fight away by getting hit in the last 20 seconds of 2 rounds there. And he landed a ton of leg kicks, but he didn't land many punches, if any. And that's the reason he lost that fight. Jake Collier, he's going to throw some leg kicks, which I don't think Andre is going to deal with too well, but I also think he's going to be throwing hands. He's going to throw kicks to the body. I think he's going to fight at a pace that's unsustainable for Andre. So that's the reason I like him. I'm on Collier. He's my biggest bet of the weekend, and I'm going to be looking forward to that fight. So with that being said, we can move along to the main event of the evening. And this was a fight that I got more and more compelled by the longer I looked into it. Straight up, I thought that Rob Font was going to bounce the jab off this guy's head all night. I was like, man, he's going to be a longer guy. He's got a great jab. Chito's not great at covering distance. He's got pretty good angular footwork. But sometimes he's a little plodding. Sometimes he's a little reliant on the low kicks from the outside. Sometimes all the time. He starts really slow and he doesn't get after somebody until he starts getting hit, until he starts, giving up some early minutes, which I don't love. But with all that being said, the reason that I took Jose Aldo against Rob Font is because I believe Rob Font is a bit soft to the body. And I think that if you look at a couple of fights that he's had where he gets hit and hurt, I think he's got a pretty good, chin. Like if you look at Rob Font, he's been hit pretty cleanly to the face a lot of times, and most of the time he could take it without issue. But I think sometimes you got to look for these guys that have other vulnerabilities. And with Daniel Cormier, it was body shots. You hit the guy in the head, he's got a pretty brick head. Other than that John Jones head kick, he really has been able to take even incredible head strikes, like Anthony Johnson punched him across the octagon, like knocked him off his feet. He still got back up from that. Whereas Stipe touches him to the body with that left hook a few times and it starts changing his face. Anderson hits him with the teep to the body and he's like staring off 1,000 yards in the other direction. Like I think some guys can't take body shots too good. And I think Rob Font is one of them, unfortunately. So when I look at this fight, I see, Chito Vera, he's probably going to have some opportunities to get in tight, to hit Rob Font to the body. Rob doesn't have a ton of stopping power. He had Cody Garbrandt in front of him for 25 minutes. Can't put the guy away. That for me is a little bit of a problem. He's got an opportunity with Jose Aldo. He's changing his face with the jab. He can't win the rounds. He loses every round despite winning, 21 minutes of the fight? How do you do that? Like, that's just really bad fight management, in my opinion. So could he learn from that? Could he make some improvements, some adaptations for this fight? I think he certainly could. But I think that he's shown some vulnerabilities in the clinch. I think that he's shown he can be taken down. I think Chito can take him down. And I think that Chito, I looked into both these guys pretty in depth in terms of their camp, in terms of who they're training with, in terms of their preparations. And when I look at Rob Font, he's doing the same old shit. And it's fine. It's gotten him this far. He's working with the New England cartel. He's working with the guys in New Hampshire, Renzo Gracie affiliate up in New Hampshire. More power to him, all good things. But then I look at this guy, Chito Vera, and he's training with Jason Perillo, world championship coach. He's training with, very good competitors out there. It looks like a camp at RVCA is built all towards him right now. Then I look at who he's training with in the jiu-jitsu. He's training with the Rotullo brothers. He's training with the Mendez brothers. He's training with, just studs, legends, world champions. Like, the guy is bringing in a gambit of competitors. I don't think it's by accident, right? I don't think Chito's going to go out there and try and have a range boxing match with Rob Font. He said, I'm going to kick your ass. I think he's going to get in there, try and make it a dirty brawl, try and get in his face, trying to close distance all night, trying to press him back to the fence. And I think Chito's going to look for opportunities to get on top of him, to break him with pace and pressure. And I think that Chito over 5 rounds is a dangerous competitor. I look at Chito and I say, who's got more opportunities to build? I rate Song Yadong. I think he's a great fighter. I thought he probably did beat Chito, but it's super close. It was really competitive, and especially late, it looked like Chito was taking over that fight. I think Song's going to be a guy in this top 10, for a little while. I think that I look at Chito, he's able to storm on Frankie Edgar. That was impressive to me to come back and finish him like that. I know it's Frankie. I know his durability is a little shot, but the composure that he has over the course of these 15 minutes and the opportunism, this guy is looking for a finish. And when he finds one, he latches onto it, and he puts people away. We've seen that Rob Font is a very tough guy, but I thought Jose Aldo could have put him away if he elected to. I know that's going to sound like a conspiracy theory take or something like that. I think Jose Aldo wanted to prove he could go 5 rounds. He hurt him in every round and never put the gas on him to try and finish. And maybe that was him just trying to preserve cardio. Maybe it was all subconscious. After the fight, the first thing he said was, you guys all said I couldn't go 5 rounds. I wanted to prove I could go 5 rounds. Like, I was like, son of a bitch. I never had a chance on Aldo ITD. I think that Chito ITD has a chance. I think Chito late round props that people are shouting has a chance. I think Chito early has a chance. I know that he's not going to start round 1 on fire. But what I will say is I've seen Rob Font get overwhelmed by somebody before. I think it could happen again. It's happened to guys that are against guys that are smaller than him. They could give that pressure. They didn't give a shit about getting hit back. And there is going to come a bill. I think my man Dan from Half the Battle said there's going to come a bill due for Chito Vera eventually, right? It's like you can't just get hit cleanly in every fight and soldier through it forever. Somebody's going to make this guy pay at the top of the division. But I don't know if it's Rob Font, man. He hits people with jabs. He doesn't really put together the combinations that you want to see all the time. He does good body work himself, but I think this guy Chito is tougher than all shit. I think that it's going to be really hard to put him away. But the only hesitation I have, the reason I have not gotten to the window yet, is last time that I saw this situation, my man Calvin Cater, I backed up the truck on my man Calvin Cater because he was the dog, and he came through in big fashion. People wrote him off because he had taken a big sustained beating. And people were like, I'm out. Calvin Cater, he'll never be the same. And I said, it's possible. But if he's anything like what I've used to been seeing, he's going to beat the shit out of this guy. Rob Font, at his best, is going to work behind a jab. He has shown that his cardio has definitely made strides from his old 15-minute fights to that 25-minute fight. He was able to push through and keep a high pace. But I do think that it was starting to go down and down and down over the course of the rounds. I do think that that pace is starting to slow ever so slightly. And when you've got somebody like Jose Aldo, who's a little bit older, he's going to concede to that. He's like, all right, you want to slow down, young man? Let's slow down. I don't think you're going to see that from Chito. I think Chito, I described it this way on the Roto Grinders podcast as well. Who's the meaner fighter? It's no question. Chito Vera is a mean son of a bitch. When he's in the octagon, he has no friends. He's not here to be a nice guy. He doesn't care about people's opinion. He's going to try to hit you, hurt you, scratch, claw, bite you, do whatever he needs to beat you. He is fighting for money. He does not care about friends or morals or anything like that in the octagon. And for better or for worse, I respect that a lot from a betting perspective. I don't like getting in front of guys like that. I think Chito's the more dangerous guy. So ultimately, forced to pick, I would go with Chito Vera with limited confidence here. I think it should be a hell of a fight. I think Rob Font's going to give it to him a bit early, probably fuck his face up with that jab because Chito doesn't have great defense. But I think that Chito eventually submits this guy in transition. I don't think Rob has bad jiu-jitsu, but I think he is going to slow down. I think he is going to gas out over the course of this fight if it's fought at Chito's pace especially. Yeah, I think it should be a hell of a fight. But overall, I wanted to be on the Rob Font side, and I couldn't do it. I saw too much on the Chito Vera side that makes me think he's a live underdog. So I will be going dog or pass on this main event. Luke, how about you?
I wouldn't say super strong opinion on the other side, but I'm pretty close to betting Rob Font. I'm just not a huge fan of Vera. I still think now that he's starting to enter the top 10 of the division, he definitely has good attributes. Like you said, his cardio is good. The dude's tough as shit. He can grapple. He's a dog in there 100%. I've never said anything disparaging about Vera in that capacity, but there's still a lot of parts of his game that he has not evolved. I don't think his defense has really evolved much. He can get stuck on his back at points too. And just, I don't like that slower starting nature now that you're starting to fight top guys. When you're fighting in an elite level competition, starting slow and just dropping minutes and rounds and forcing yourself, I guess, to, have to go out there and secure later finishes or like that. That to me, that's just like stupid. Like it's a dumb, non-optimal game plan. You can't be dropping minutes at this level. Long term, that's going to catch up to you. In general at some point, unless you can, play the game elite. A couple of disconcerting fights for me, especially with Vera outside of general slowing starting nature. I think he's dropped the first round in like 85% of his UFC fights. Davey Grant was doing a ton of good work early in that fight. Frankie Edgar, the ghost of Frankie Edgar, apparently at this point, was doing a ton of good work early on him. And I just think Rob Font's easily the best striker he's fought to date. It's primarily been boxing based guys that have given Vera some of the biggest issues. And I'm just not sold on this narrative that because the build nature of Vera historically, that he's just going to mollywop Rob in the latter rounds at all. I want to say Rob fucks him up because I do think it's going to be a somewhat competitive fight, but I do think the price with even a slight lean to Font is a little bit short. I think he puts a vet lesson on this guy. I just have not seen enough evolution from Chito in the defensive front. I think Font outboxes him.
Nice. And that makes sense, man. What I will say that I think is interesting and may bolster your point is that this opened at minus 175 on the Rob Font side, plus 150 on the Chito Vera side. So a lot of public action has pushed this number down for sure. I do think that it reflects some sharp movement, given the fact that it stayed down at this price, given the fact that it's kind of moved across the whole market, settled out around this plus 115, plus 110 type nature. I do think that there's also certainly a chance that Rob justifies his price here. If he's able to keep Chito at the end of the jab, it could just be 5 rounds of Rob Font walking him around. He does have a long jab. He does have pretty competent boxing. He can step off on angles. And if Chito's not able to get inside with his kicking game, it's going to be tough. I just think that Chito does present some interesting challenges. He's going to kick the legs. He's going to kick the body. He's going to try and offer those teeps. He's going to try and offer a bunch of clinch work if he's able to get it there. And I do think that we've seen, a little bit of susceptibility to a wrestling approach from Rob Font. Chito kind of got out-savvied by Jose Aldo. He didn't really get out-fought by him. I actually thought Aldo was a little bit nervous in that spot. He was feeling the pressure from Chito and was like, fuck, I better get this guy's back. And he took his back and never gave a second about trying to finish. He just held on to him. He's like, I'm holding on to this young man and not letting him move because I don't want to deal with any more problems. Because I did think that Chito was starting to turn it up on Aldo a little bit. I don't think that we saw that from Font. Font really didn't have that second gear to kick it into, which is what concerned me. I think even against Marlon Moraes, he didn't need to kick it into second gear, right? He hits him with a jab. He almost accidentally knocked him out. He was like, oh shit, he's on wobbly legs. I better go finish him. And that was good on him, good finishing instincts from Rob Font. But I do have this question mark in my head where if Rob's power isn't able to keep this guy off, I think we're going to see Marlon willing to walk through damaging shots and just get into his face. So I think it's going to be a war. I think it should be a great fight. I do think that narrative might have some play, but boy, these New England cartel guys have shut us the fuck up before, and I would not be stunned. I would not put it past them to do it again. So shout out to Rob Font. He's got another teammate, I believe, in Candelario on the card. These guys are coming to play. Serious guys, both put in the training camp together, both put in the training camp with Calvin Cater as well, training with a bunch of legit pros up there in the New England cartel, guys with good records. So no slouches in the camp of Rob Font. He's very serious. Same thing can be said for Chito Vera. Both these guys put in the hard work, and I think that we're going to see a great fight. Shout out to my man Nick Alexander in the chat, says Vera looking for a finish to claim a shot at the title. Hey, you're probably right, but Rob Font is no slouch. He's no pushover. Jose Aldo just went the full 25 with this guy, and I got tremendous respect for Jose Aldo. So I think that speaks well of Rob Font as well. He can hang in there for 25 minutes with tough guys. I just think it's going to be an uphill battle to do so for the full 25 with this guy, Chito. He's a mean son of a bitch, man. I really feel that way. I liked a lot of what I saw from him in terms of his attitude, his energy, and his improvements over time. But I have been fading this guy, Chito, in recent fights, so haven't decided if I'm going to get to the window with him. Just think that overall he's proved me wrong in some realms. He's been better than I expected, and I don't want to keep losing money underestimating the guy. I'm going to have to change my strategy eventually, and I'm looking at the returns on investment for this Chito Vera guy. Insane. Backing him as a favorite has been profitable. Backing him as an underdog has been profitable. So I'm just a little weary of standing on the other side. Both these guys, if you've bet money on them, you've made money. That's why they made it to the main event. Both talented guys, both proven contenders in a very tough division. So I'm freaking excited, man. On what is an otherwise pretty tepid UFC offering, this is really a tremendous main event in my view. So is there any fight you're looking forward to in particular, Luke?
I kind of hope that we do actually see, outside of my general bet, I do hope we see the Lainesse guy not kill Gabe Green, because I think that actually could just be a generally pretty fun fight.
I'm with you, man. At 170 pounds, those guys come to scrap, bring a lot of power to the table on both sides, I think. And Gabe Green does have that low kicking game. He almost got a low kick finish once in the UFC. Can he do it again if his opponent starts to slow down? Certainly a live question. Should be a great fight. Two active strikers. So shout out to you for that recommendation. I'm looking forward to this card. I hope that you guys are all looking forward to this card as well. If you've got a favorite bet, if you've got a favorite fight that's going to be taking place this Saturday, go ahead and drop it below. If you have any questions, go ahead and shoot them to me in the comment section below this video or on Twitter at LiamPicksFights. You can find my co-host here today, Luke, at SWR_betting. You can find all his information in the description box below. Got his website link there, his third-party tracked record. This guy's been doing the damn thing, producing high percentage, 8% ROI, over 80 units of profit. This guy's been killing the game. So shout out my man, Luke. Luke, anything that you have to say, anything you have to get off your chest, anywhere you want to direct the people, let them know where they can find you, my brother.
Yeah, man. Just thanks for having me on. Again, apologies, guys. My energy level not overtly high on this show. Once again, I'm riding the struggle bus a little bit with being sick. So thanks for sticking through with me on that. But yeah, Twitter, as Liam touched on, patreon.com/SWR betting. That's where I put up all my bets, 4 content pieces a week on there, for 10, 15, or $20 a month, depending on the tier. So just another opinion in the space. If you're looking for some detail, just another additional content pieces out there for you as well. I think the breakdowns I usually put up are usually anywhere between 10 to 15,000 words a week. So pretty in depth over there as well. So yeah, thanks, Liam. Thanks for having me on, bro.
Absolutely, my man. It's always my pleasure. Love breaking down these fights with you. Always a compelling conversation. And I can personally speak to the fact that been talking to Luke for a long time. Really enjoy his thoughts on these fights. Really enjoy the way he breaks them down. He's an analytical guy. He thinks about the numbers game. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm not trying to be Nostradamus. I'm not trying to be the world's greatest UFC predictor. I'm trying to make money. I'm trying to bet on these fights and turn a profit. So picking the fights right, that's what I like to do. I do put that in my namesake, but also I'm trying to make money. I'm trying to turn a profit on these bets. So I like to make these underdog shots. I like to look for a little bit of value. I like to snipe out these lines. And I appreciate all you guys that come with us on this same journey every week. It's a tough card from a UFC perspective to get excited about, but we still look for our betting angles. We still find good spots and opportunities. Hope that we were able to do that once again this week. So thank you guys all for coming along on the ride. This has been another great episode of Liam Pick Fights. God bless you all. Enjoy the fights. And until next time, come back next week. We're going to have all the same fun again. Thank you guys so much. Take care.